It is 8 minutes. You've been listening to Paul Rouse in conversation with Joe Malloy. The full conversation available on youtube.com/off the ball. Now, a couple of years ago, you might have been familiar with the birth of a famous new slot on Off the Ball. There was an Off the Ball roadshow. Ger was in conversation with Warren Gatland, and he dished the dirt on his relationship with Sean O'Brien. At that moment, Ger delivered the now iconic phrase, "The beef is real," screaming it at the top of his lungs, and we had the birth of a brand new slot. But never did we think The Beef is Real would reach such momentous moments like we have this morning. What is happening, Ger?
Forget your Dickie Rock versus Johnny Logan. Forget your Chrissy Teigen versus whoever she's up against. It's Buff Egan versus Kieran Cunningham.
Friend of the show, Kieran Cunningham of the Irish Daily Star. What's happened for people who haven't been following?
Well, I guess this all started when Sean Cavanagh spoke about the 6 counties, the occupied territories, or Northern Ireland, depending on how you speak about these things, as being part of the UK. Up here in the UK, I think was the fairly anodyne phrase he used to talk about how the situation is different because obviously, you know, there's a partitioned situation on the island. That part of the island has a very heavily influence from the Westminster government in London, who set a lot of policies when it comes to comings and goings, particularly in the time of a global pandemic. And this obviously led to a lot of discussion about the correct use of the language. Some of that was in measured tones, saying, well, you know, I mean, perhaps we all need to listen to what he's saying, and perhaps we need to talk to reach out across the barricades to other people of different persuasion. And then some of it was fairly out there. I think was the word traitor used in some dispatches. And then Buff Egan was one of those people who tweeted in an angry fashion about it, citing the infamous Brawley, "You can forget about him as a man," which was obviously about a thing on the field of play as opposed to something he said off the field. And then Kieran Cunningham, 24 hours later, tweeted 24 hours ago, "I'd never heard of Buff Egan," at which point Buff's heckles were raised. And he came after Kieran Cunningham using some of his more famous phrases like delete, 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 and some of the rest of them, which I'm not going to lie, I haven't followed the etymology of Buff's language and his patois, and so I didn't know the rest of them. But the Buff bots were out in force.
That's for sure. Buff Egan is the opposite of Tyler Durden. The first rule of Buff Club is you absolutely do talk about Buff, and he definitely does exist, and you don't say that you hadn't heard of him or he wasn't on your radar before. I should say we've just tweeted off the Off the Ball AM account. In the interest of burying the beef, we've reached out to both Buff and Kieran to join us on OTB AM. Our aim is to reach a shared understanding of the future of all communities on this island, both pro and anti-Buff factions. Live until 10 a.m. Says the tweet, and we echo that. We echo that. We just want to bring a shared understanding. But I have a confession to make as well this morning. It won't be a confession to you, Ger. You've been abhorred by my behaviour on the show in the past. But when we were doing our World Cup of Ireland's greatest sporting moments of the last decade, what was it, last December at this point, I hit a new low when I mistakenly referred to Shane Lowry's success at the Open last year as one of Ireland's great successes abroad. It was an absolute embarrassment. A couple of weeks ago, I doubled down on my political stance when I accidentally referred to the Belfast director of the Lake commercial as a foreign director. My GAA season ticket has been taken off me. Any tricolour I've ever been pictured with, those photos have now been burnt, and I will now be kicked out of this country, probably up there into the UK at some point in the near future.
And are you happy with that? Is that actually, you know, you're going back to your own people? Is that like, you know, going home in some aspects for you, Eoin?
Well, you know, my entire life is just some sort of imperialism on behalf of Her Majesty, and that's what I do. That's what I do for a living here. But yeah, this is like, we should obviously rename this to The Buff is Real rather than The Beef is Real for this sort of slot. But from Warren Gatland versus Sean O'Brien to Buff Egan versus Kieran Cunningham, this is a lockdown beef. But I want to see who comes out on top. I can't imagine there are any correct way of dealing with the Buff Egan bots, the Buff bots as you put them, when they come crawling into your timeline.
Delete, 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 I believe is the correct phrase, right? It's like that mute button is there for a reason.
Absolutely, it is. Tweet us at Off the Ball if you've got any opinions on this brand new beef, which will be coming back to, I dare say, over the course of the next couple of hours on OTB AM. We are with you until 10 o'clock this morning. Coming up, as we said earlier on, we've got the best ever Man United Premier League 11, Colin Buig versus Daniel Harris, which is spark a bit of debate. The other thing, Ger, across some of the papers is just about the Bundesliga return, about football's return in general. €19 is how much it will cost you to put a cardboard U in the stands at Borussia Mönchengladbach this weekend for the Bundesliga. They had a few cardboard cutouts for their last game, which was held behind closed doors, and expect to have 12,000 cardboard cutouts of fans so far. Would you part with €19 for this?
This is obviously a fundraiser for the clubs, right? It's a way for you to show your support for the club in this difficult time. I suspect if you're a Bundesliga fan, then are they one of the clubs where you actually own part of the club if you're the fan? So this is just a way of them kind of giving you something back in return for your hard-earned cash. Personally, I can't see myself buying a piece of cardboard for a Bundesliga game, but if I was asked to buy one for the Thai football club or whatever, then I can see why you would do that, I also see why it's a ludicrous looking thing, and people are going to make fun of this on the internet and go, this is ridiculous. But any port in the storm, I believe, is the phrase that I've been reaching for over the last 3 months here, Eoin. And this is the storm, and that looks like a nice cardboard cutout shaped port.
Shane Hannon, very good morning to you. Have you ever heard of Buff Egan?
I have heard of Buff Egan. There's a bit of buff stew going on, is there? It's quite controversial, this. That was horrific, I'm sorry. No, I saw Kieran tweeting yesterday. I had been aware of Buff Egan. Coincidentally, I only followed Buff Egan on Twitter, on Instagram about 3 days ago. I had heard of him beforehand, though. I realised he was this kind of, I guess you call him a GAA character who goes to matches and commentates on matches from the stands and has his own take on Gaelic games. But yeah, he's quite an interesting guy.
I think, in fairness, there has been a spotlight shone on lower tier hurling and club hurling, especially in places like Kerry, where you wouldn't often get, good televised matches and stuff like that, which people have been mentioning the last couple of days. How can you not have known about this guy? If you know anything about Kerry hurling or anything like that, or lower tier hurling, you know about this guy. So, yeah. So you only discovered him this week?
Yeah, I'd been firmly aware of his existence and had actually seen him at a couple of Kerry games before, but never had the nerve to go up and never meet your heroes and all that. But he seems like quite an interesting guy, and as you said, look, if he's increasing interest in some smaller level games or lower tier action, then what harm does it cause? And we need a bit of GAA beef as well, I think. I mean, there's not enough aggro. I mean, we used to have days where.
What harm does it cause? Does Barstool republicanism really serve the future of the island well? Is it actually all harmless fun when, I don't know. I mean, look, it's important that this political viewpoint is aired so we can talk about it and tease it out. But I'm just not sure that, it's like you build up this massive following for one thing and then you do this other thing and it's like, oh, okay. So if I go what you're saying, and I like that gets shot on second and third tier hurling, and it's great. It's got a cult following, and then you become a kind of a leader in that community, and then you use that leadership to propagate a viewpoint, which, I think that the Good Friday Agreement gave us a direction to head in, where we were all going to recognize that everybody had a right to coexist on the island without blowing the shit out of each other. Then maybe that's not. Maybe there's I feel like there's danger in that we should talk about.
I feel like the context is obviously needed as well, and the presenter, I think, of the piece which Sean had said, I had been asking him a question in the context of, dealing with issues in the GAA between two jurisdictions. So the question had been set up for Sean to be talking about the UK and to be talking about the South as well. So context is definitely needed. And I mean, look, I live in a border area in Monaghan, 2 miles from Armagh. So I think even people here wouldn't take issue with what Sean said. I think it's understanding that, these things are said with context, and everyone knows Sean's views on the issue.
Are you sure there wasn't a rally with pitchforks? And are you sure there wasn't a rally with pitchforks and turf on fire out last night looking for Sean Cavanagh? Is that not really what the team was like in the Monaghan-Armagh border last night, Shane?
That's just a regular weekend thing that we go out searching for Sean Kavanagh since he pulled down Conor McManus in Croke Park and robbed us of an All-Ireland semi-final. So that happens every weekend. So there's nothing really new there. But yeah, I feel for Sean a bit in this one because look, he seems like a good guy, and that's quite tough for a Monaghan man to say about a Tyrone player. But you know, he's been caught up in a storm that really, in all intents and purposes, should not be a storm. So it's a strange one.
You, of course, you are the county that fell victim to the forget. You can forget about him as a man situation, actually. So if you talk about the beef is real, Sheahan versus Sean Kavanagh is perhaps actually the original beef here. I'm sure you were all on Joe Broddy's side at that moment. What have you got going on this morning, Shane?
Yeah, a few bits. We'll start with some soccer news for you this morning, lads. Premier League club captains, senior players and managers will be briefed on the medical aspects of Project Restart today. A number of players like Newcastle's on loan Danny Rose have voiced opposition to returning during a pandemic. It's believed that the UK's Deputy Chief Medical Officer, Jonathan Van Tam, will be present on the video conference calls to allay fears about resuming. Meanwhile, police in England are softening their stance regarding the use of neutral venues. As many as a dozen Premier League sides are against the idea. Pat Nevin believes Premier League teams are letting themselves down with petty politicking over matches at neutral venues. The former Chelsea and Scotland man joined Off the Ball last night to discuss the Premier League resumption and was angry at the attitude of clubs behaving in a self-interested manner. You can read Pat's full thoughts at offtheball.com. Football league sides will meet today, meanwhile, to discuss whether to continue or end the current season. It's being widely reported teams in League 1 and League 2 will vote to cancel the campaign, with promotion and relegation being decided on a points per game ratio. I know that's something Miguel Delaney spoke about yesterday on OTB AM. The Portuguese top flight will resume on June 4th. It's been suspended since March because of the pandemic, and there are 10 rounds of games remaining there. Meanwhile, in the Bundesliga, of course, due to return, Emre Can and Belgian international Axel Witsel will miss Borussia Dortmund's derby with Schalke on Saturday as German football returns. Because Chan and Witsel both need treatment for muscle strains, they have had to leave the team's quarantine bubble and therefore cannot play on Saturday regardless of their fitness. As the Bundesliga restarts, Dortmund are second in the table, 4 points off Bayern Munich. To Scotland, Rangers have failed in their attempts to force an independent investigation into the Scottish Professional Football League. The Ibrox club had joined with Hearts and Stranraer in calling for a general meeting after the lower league season was controversially ended last month. To matters rugby, World Rugby says there's been a positive response to their trials of new rules aimed at improving player welfare. Reducing the tackle height to waist level has been trialled in the French lower leagues. World Rugby says it's resulted in a threefold decrease in injuries and a 60% reduction in concussion. Meanwhile, tries scored at the base of the post will be outlawed when the sport resumes. The Guinness Pro14 remain confident of completing a season suspended by COVID-19. The season has been on indefinite hold since March 19th. The finals in Cardiff, of course, cancelled. Glasgow head coach Dave Rennie has called for unbeaten Leinster to be crowned this season's champions. But Pro14 commercial director Dermot Rigney says plans are afoot for the league to resume this side of 2021. To racing, Epsom Downs Racecourse has thanked the local conservators for allowing this year's Derby and Oaks to be staged behind closed doors. They hope to stage the classics in late July or indeed in August. A perimeter fence will be erected around the racecourse for a 24-hour period around race day. The chief executive of UK Athletics says that the governing body is absolutely not facing bankruptcy, despite taking a 7-figure hit by cancelling its flagship event. Joanna Coates admitted that pulling the plug on the anniversary games, scheduled for July 4th and 5th at the London Stadium, was a significant blow. She told the Times newspaper this morning that the governing body expected to lose more than £1 million from the cancellation and could not rule out redundancies. UK Athletics made losses of £825,000 in its most recent accounts and has already undergone 2 rounds of furloughing. And finally, lads, some Formula 1 news. Martin Brundle believes that there's a good chance that Sebastian Vettel might retire at the end of the current Formula 1 season. It follows Ferrari's announcement the 4-time world champion will be leaving the team at the end of his contract. Ferrari seem to be focusing their future on their other driver, Charles Leclerc, who was signed to a new 5-year contract committing the team until 2024. Should mention in rally news as well, I have an interview done with Rosemary Smith, the Irish rally legend. That full interview has just gone live on offtheball.com. So plenty of interesting stories from her, reversing backwards over the Khyber Pass between Pakistan and Afghanistan, winning the Tulip Rally in the Netherlands in 1965, and indeed, lads, becoming the oldest person to drive a Formula 1 car in 2017 at the tender age of 79. So extraordinary stuff from Rosemary.
It's an amazing story. Can I just ask you, explain this Vettel beef? What's going on? And why does it matter?
It's an interesting one because Vettel last year was involved in a lot of accidents and incidents. He crashed into the back of Max Verstappen. He crashed into the back of Lando Norris, and was involved in a lot of skirmishes. Now, look, these things happen in Formula One. They're travelling at extortionate speeds, but Vettel was in his fair share of them. He seems quite frustrated at Ferrari. It seems to be an issue with personalities. I mean, he asked for more money, wanted to sign a new contract. His contract was up this year. They weren't going to give him more money. They were offering him a new contract, less money, and it seems they're putting this young guy, Charles Leclerc, as front and centre. Now, it seems a bit unfair in Vettel. He's a four-time world champion, frustrated because, of course, Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton have a big stranglehold on Formula One at the moment. But it's an interesting one. It's hard to see Vettel going anywhere else at the moment, given the wages he looks for. But it would be a sad way for him to go out of Formula One because he's an extraordinary driver, four-time world champion, as I said. And it'll be interesting to see who takes his place. I mean, the Carlos Sainz from McLaren and Daniel Ricciardo from Renault have been the two names mooted. So who knows? But the merry-go-rounds among drivers are no stranger to Formula One. But sad way for Vettel to leave Ferrari for sure.
Absolutely. Sheahan, thanks a million for joining us this morning.
Cheers, lads.
Breaking news. We've got a statement in from one of the parties in this morning's Beef is Real. Kieran Cunningham. Two-word statement, Michael Jordan-esque two-word statement. Go away, he says on Twitter. No word from Team Buff Egan just yet, but our people are in touch with his people, and we might have something to bring you on that before 10 o'clock. So a short, snappy statement from Kieran Cunningham. Not the end, I dare say. Not the last we'll hear from either of these parties. Coming up this morning, between now and 10 o'clock, we've got the sports pages coming in just a second. The best ever Manchester United Premier League 11 with Cullen Buig and Daniel Harris. How's the head with Tipperary's Ashley McCarthy before Colombo Culture Hall of Fame with Now TV. Paul Howard is going to be inducting Colombo after 9 o'clock this morning. And then we'll be chatting as well about the UFC's return. Chuck Mindenhall of The Athletic will be joining myself and Joe a little bit later on to chat through what happened in Jacksonville at the weekend and what the plans are for Dana White, for the UFC and for the sport as a whole over the next couple of weeks and months. Before all that, it is time for the sports pages.
OTB AM.
We'll start with offtheball.com. Pat Nevin there leading the way. I am angry about it is the headline. Nevin on Premier League and neutral venues, voicing the concern that Premier League clubs really should be taking the opportunity to go back and actually play games, whether it is behind neutral venues or not, and the idea that certain clubs are forcing the issue of either playing home and away or nothing at all doesn't reflect well. Meanwhile, Celtic welcome rejection of investigation into SPFL vote to end season. Shane has already mentioned that story there about World Rugby outlawing tries from balls grounded against post protector. It's an effing joke. Danny Rose hits out at plans to restart Premier League, and David Ginola says he nearly retired after USA 94 heartbreak.
First up for me is the Irish Independent this morning. And the Irish Independent have a couple of big stories in their back there. Why a rights issue is stopping RTE from showing old GAA classic games. The rights issue is fairly simple. Air Sports have the rights. RTE don't have the rights. And, if you're going to show games you don't have the rights for, that kind of is a breach of contract. So this is obviously a little bit of negotiation that RTE are trying to do through the media to put pressure on Air or the GAA to release games. That seems to me to be what's going on here. Because I can't imagine RTE would be very happy if Virgin Media rocked up to a GAA match that they didn't have rights for and started showing them. This is essentially exactly the same thing. It's just that that's what RTE are looking for. And maybe they don't want to pay whatever the price that Air Sports are looking for at this time, given that there's nothing else happening, and they're not going to have to pay a rights fee this year to the GAA, or at least the same rights fee to the GAA that they would have had to pay for all the games they were showing. There was another story there, I don't know if it was Dan McDonald's story in the back of the Indo there about the League of Ireland's underlying conditions and why that makes it so vulnerable. That's one of the other stories that they're covering there. And the GAA looking for further state aid as the 50 million loss looms large.
The Irish Times this morning leads with that story of the rule change in rugby. World Rugby outlaws tries against the post, writes John O'Sullivan. New law will come into effect immediately. There will be games, but not with fans, says Owens. This is Gary Owens of the FAI talking about what's going to happen over the next couple of months, really kind of speculating about what's going to happen over the next couple of months, as we all are really. You kind of mentioned the League of Ireland elements there already, Ger. And as we've already alluded to this morning, the Bundesliga story, cardboard fans, piped applause, stadiums in the COVID age. Borussia Mönchengladbach have sold 12,000 cardboard cutouts of fans so far, 19 quid to put a cardboard ewe in the stands, and visiting fans can book cutouts for the away end as well. And Sean Moran writing about the reaction to Kavanagh and how the reaction to that interview has just been nothing short of bizarre. He says he goes back to lines in Sean Kavanagh's book, the piece by Declan Bogue last year, I think, wasn't it, when the Come Out You Black and Tans video emerged of the Tyrone team, to kind of show the fairly conscientious mindset that Sean Kavanagh has and how that's been put out there in the past. And I guess the reaction has been sort of strange. Like, it's, Ger, I'm not sure about you, like maybe I just kind of wasn't really looking through Twitter that much on Sunday night, but I didn't really see too many people on my feed at least actually bashing Kavanagh for this, because that kind of would have been a strange thing to do, I would have thought.
Yeah, and look, I don't want to in any way represent them or put forward their side of the argument, but like, it's fairly straightforward. People talking in a certain way about something that a cohort of people disagree with, and then cancel culture kicks in, and all of a sudden Sean Kavanagh is essentially the new Maggie Thatcher, and there's no real room for nuance. I did see some people who were quite nuanced saying, you know, Irish nationalists don't feel like you should really refer to this territory as the UK. You know, where they're striving for United Ireland, and anything that in any way diminishes that outcome in the short term is therefore a wrong use of language, and that needs to be discussed. I saw some people putting forward that viewpoint without the ad hominem attacks that essentially kicked off this the beef is real joke that we've been talking about this morning. Because you know, so many people completely overreacted, as opposed to saying, well, look, it is actually time that we do have a conversation around the language. Like, do we in the 26 counties really actually want a united Ireland? And if we do, then you're going to have to get used to the fact that it won't look like 26 counties annexing the 6 counties and everything is then suddenly green, white and orange and everybody has to shut the F up, or because that's not how that's going to work. You won't ever get anywhere if you're going to inflict the way that situation was inflicted 100 years ago, led to violence. If you inflict again, you're going to repeat the mistakes just on the other side. For sure. Like, it's we should definitely just kind of hammer at home that obviously the Buff Egan thing we were chatting about at the start is obviously a joke. Like that's even kind of the nature of how that's kind of turned into a completely unconnected beef over the course of the last 12 to 18 hours is just kind of hilarious in itself. I personally just can't see how you're listening to that and you can completely hammer Sean Kavanagh for that or get completely carried away with what he says. Like, Sean Moran's headline really is something I would totally agree with. The reaction has been nothing short of bizarre, really, that there is a certain potentially insecurity as well to people hearing Sean Kavanagh and reacting like that. Literally 2 words. Believe me, you can misspeak around these sorts of things fairly easily. It doesn't represent your entire political worldview. No, and it's actually, but sometimes it is worth having these conversations and taking these opportunities to go, okay, there's clearly a cohort of people out there who agree with calling Sean Kavanagh names because that's how he spoke or that's how he thinks. Like, let's just for a second, you know, consider the possibility that there are people who are from a traditionally nationalist community in the north who kind of feel like, well, we exist in a real world here. We live in Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland is currently governed by the Assembly, but it is still part of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Like, that's how it has been codified. And if there is a desire for people on this side of the border to change that, then we have to recognize that those people need to be brought with you as opposed to bullied and shouted down and called names, because that hasn't really worked the other way around, has it? Yeah, I should actually say that. I kind of suggested there that Sean Kavanagh misspoke. If he didn't, and he said, also up here in the UK, like as you just said there, that's fine too. And the idea that you're banging down the door and saying this kind of shows that you hate the idea of Ireland is obviously lunacy. But if the case was the actual view is up here in the UK and that was his real view, like obviously that's totally fine as well. But I think as Sean Moran goes to point out here, that is not the view. And I think most people who have read Sean Kavanagh's book or have heard him speak before realise that that's not the view either. the next one for me is the Examiner this morning, and so their front page is Irish Rugby's roadmap to return is taking shape. This is Donald Lenihan's piece, and just kind of teasing out some of the details of what might come next and how it might look in terms of at least rugby being played between the provinces, matches against each other. Pro14 chiefs consider bio bubbles in effort to restart the game. I hadn't seen that story before. That's from Brendan O'Brien there, saying that the organisers are considering the operation of the bio bubbles. We're working on clean venues, and testing is obviously the key point here, and how quickly you can get results back. The modelling that the tournament team here has worked on is bio bubble scenario, where there's an absolutely clean venue or campus when no one leaves or comes in after a while. So that's that part of the story. Tipperary Hurling senior manager Liam Sheedy is convinced an intercounty championship behind closed doors, along with stringent safety measures, would lift the nation. And so he's saying a championship behind closed doors would lift the nation, but also it's better than nothing. And I think, John Horan was very clear that behind closed doors isn't on the agenda at the moment, but it's worth having those conversations. It's worth, what would that look like? Why would we be doing that? When could we possibly do that? You're seeing some of the science. Again, I'm always loath to accept at face value the science is coming out saying, our sport is going to be able to go ahead because apparently in football you're only like 90 seconds in close contact with somebody over the course of 90 minutes of a match. That sounds, it's interesting that that figure has emerged and it looks so positive, just as we're trying to convince the world that football coming back is the right thing to do. But again, that's the figures that they're putting out there. And then Kieran Kingston has been talking about digital platforms being a way of the future for county teams. So I think the whole world is looking at new ways of working, and whether or not we're going to have an office-based culture the way we have traditionally had, and whether or not we're going to have meeting-based cultures the way we've traditionally had in all aspects of our life. So production meetings for this show might not always happen in person the way that they would have happened traditionally 6 months ago, 3 months ago. In GAA, do you need all of your support team traveling to every training session? And there's definitely a case to be made that you could do your strength and conditioning from home, as opposed to, especially if your commute is 2.5, 3 hours. Is there a way of making sure that your team is bonded in the same manner if you're the Mayo football team and everybody's in their apartment in Dublin or is in a gym in Dublin separately, versus getting them all to come over 3 nights a week to training? I don't know. Kieran Kingston is not sure, and I haven't delved into exactly the pros and cons of what he's talking about, but you can see if you're particularly at the stage that he's at now with his second stint, you'd want to get everybody together and you'd want to gel them and you'd want to see them all exactly how stressed they were getting and how shared their experience was.
It's remarkable actually how quickly the sports organisations and sports teams have actually just pivoted towards this already, and I think it's probably just been conditioned this way for a while. I think even county teams that would have been located in 2 separate parts of the country, for example, have probably already been set up to realise that there will be parts of the week where you are separate. And I guess there is a good history of inter-county managers, if we stick with GAA for a moment, picking up the phone to players and having the chats with them, and I don't know whether it's either persuading them to come back or seeing how they're fixed. There actually has been a bit of a check-in culture when it comes to managers and their players in the past. So it seems to me, on the outside looking in and listening to people like Kingston, listening to people like Mike Quirk the other night, the transition towards this new normal has been fairly seamless for them, and it's probably something that's going to stick for a good while after this all ends. The London Times back page, clubs to win ground battle is the main story here. Government backs down over neutral venues. Now worried players must be convinced to play. So they've won this battle really, that Premier League clubs will be able to use their own grounds to complete the season after positive talks between senior football figures, government officials and the police. So the concern was obviously that fans may actually gather around stadiums and show up to the games even though they're not allowed into the stadiums, and obviously that would be very unsafe indeed. But the police have given the assurances that actually that's going to be fine. So the next step now, as the headline alludes to there, is just to persuade the players that everything's going to be fine on the pitch. The other couple of stories then from the London Times this morning: UK Athletics £1 million cash blow, but the chief executive says the organisation is absolutely not facing bankruptcy. Royal Ascot on track for June then. It looks set to go ahead in its scheduled slot next month as preparations for the resumption of horse racing on June 1st take shape.
The Mirror is next. The Mirror this morning is Barca come home Pep, and this is Manchester City. Confident Pep Guardiola will see out his deal despite former Barcelona chief Joan Laporta revealing he wants him back at the Camp Nou. So that would be definitely an interesting outcome if at the end of all this, Pep decides, right, I'm going home, I've had enough. I want to go back and finish the job that I started, particularly because there's only a year or two left of Leo Messi. And that story there, I don't know if you can make it out. Jens, you're fit. COVID is no big deal. So Jens Lehmann telling it like it is. Jens Lehmann says players have to cope with the coronavirus and insists it's not a big concern for fit young athletes. The Arsenal Invincible, interesting choice of, interesting moment to drop the word invincible. But yeah, the Arsenal Invincible suffered from COVID-19 in March and said, I found it less bad than when I have had the flu. So there you go. He's on the board of Hertha Berlin. Jens Lehmann, I'm hard, basically. Come and have me, COVID. Oh, look, you tried. You failed. Come and have me.
Maybe that Arsenal team were actually informed after they got their Premier League winners' medals, you're actually invincible. Like, no matter what happens, no matter what pandemic comes, you are literally invincible. And they were like, all right, that's fantastic. And actually, we're hearing Jens Lehmann talking about his own invincibility today. So good on Jens Lehmann for not getting even the flu, it seems. The back page of the Irish Daily Mail for me is baptism of fire. 8 successive games for Kenny in FIFA proposal. So Stephen Kenny could have a bit of a baptism of fire to start off his Republic of Ireland management career with the senior team. It could involve 8 games crammed into a single international spot spanning November and December, and the congested fixture list would embrace 6 Nations League games and the Euro 2020 playoff semi-final against Slovakia.
That sounds brilliant, doesn't it?
A nice festival of football, of international football.
Like if you're trying to get the team together and you're trying to instill a way of playing for the next couple of seasons and you're trying to lay down exactly what it is you want your team to do, all of a sudden you've got this weird hothouse to be able to do it over a short period of time.
If you're getting a new manager bounce, then certainly it's going to be for a more sustained period and it's going to be more effective. Like I've always said that as long as the Slovakia game isn't the first game up, this is an ideal situation for Stephen Kenny. It's the perfect time to be a new manager because any sort of cohesion, if there's any time the cohesion is going to go out the door with previous managers that have been there for a long time, now is the time where that's going to happen.
That's a good point. Next with us is the Star, and there's a couple of things here. Home and away is the back page headline. Clubs poised to win battle and ditch neutral ground. That's the story we've already talked about. And away, Stars threatened to boycott the return. Raheem Sterling is concerned about returning to training. Dean Smith of Aston Villa said 2 of his players have asthma and may not play, while a Brighton first-team squad member has a partner with a serious underlying condition. Rangers have been urged to end the war in Scotland, and Liam Sheedy is calling for extra funding to play a role in funding behind closed doors GAA Championship in a bid to lift the nation's spirits. He says that seeing some action would trump everything in terms of the overall well-being of the country, assuming it's safe to do so. I think there's probably going to be a case that in 5 months' time, we'll know a good bit more about this, and that there probably will be an opportunity for us to play some games. And then there's a great picture there of when Irish footballers ruled Europe, and that is Sporting Sheahan's Kevin Moran and Gary Lineker, who told a great story about playing golf with Michael Jordan on Twitter last night. I don't know if you saw that, Eoin.
No, I didn't. What did he say?
He said that he got a phone call from somebody at Sunningdale saying Michael Jordan wants to come and play golf with a couple of his basketball buddies on Sunday. And Lineker's like, Sunday, okay, he needs a member. And they're like, yeah, that's why we're ringing you. And he was like, when they asked if I was available, I said, yeah, absolutely. And so the phone arrives, the phone rings the next day, and it's like, oh, listen, he wants to bring some more of his buddies. There's going to be 6 of them, so you need to get another member. So he rang another member, I think an ex-pro who was also a friend of his, who he played with, and it turns out Samuel L. Jackson was now going to be there. So Samuel L. Jackson, Michael Jordan, and 2 other current NBA players and 2 other people show up. They're there early, and Lineker says his buddy was a bit of a gambler, so they're on the first, and he looks over at Jordan and he goes, would you like to wager? Do you fancy a little side bet on? Probably didn't know exactly the stuff that we know now about Michael Jordan. And Jordan kind of takes a cigar out and looks at him and goes, yeah, absolutely. Eyes lighting up. and your man goes, how much do you want to bet? And Jordan looks at him and goes, however much is going to make you uncomfortable.
And his home got repossessed shortly thereafter.
That bit wasn't said.
The back page of the Irish Sun is Fear We Go, Prem Crunch Talks with Scared Stars. So another series of Crunch Talks today. Today it is with Premier League players. You can see a coach at Levante there disinfecting the ball at one of their La Liga and one of their La Liga stars, I should say, during training. So they're actually spraying the player and spraying the football. And those Liam Sheedy comments as well. Like, fairly interesting, actually. Like, I know we've mentioned him a couple of times, but it's big that he's saying that he'd love to see the ban lifted on GAA grounds, saying, I know that there is going to be a lifting in some places where people can go and venture for May 18th. If it can't be policed or supported, you lock the gates. But I do think we could trust the clubs and members to respect the rules and just having these pitches available.
Yeah, it's the first person to break ranks on that. You know, I think certainly the hierarchy have said that they don't really want that to happen. I do think that there's a bit too much fear about the picture of the COVIDiots. Like, so yeah, it'll be a picture for 24 hours. There'll be a backlash against the backlash, and we'll all move on pretty quickly. The Guardian is next. The Guardian. Club set for green light to finish season in their own stadiums. That's the story that we've been talking about. The UK Athletics story is the 2 million body blow. UK Athletics can't cost its anniversary games called off. And they also have a picture of Sebastian Vettel saying his shock Ferrari exit shakes up the Formula One drivers market. As Shane pointed out, he's a 4-time world champion, but he was world champion when he was with Red Bull. He hasn't been a world champion since he's been at Ferrari. I haven't watched enough Formula One, but I was under the impression that the Ferrari car had been nowhere near good enough to be competitive with Lewis Hamilton over the last while. So is this still like everybody wants to drive for Ferrari because you get to wear the red and they pay you loads of money?
I think it was mentioned in relation to Lewis Hamilton recently that how cool would it be to see him win in a Ferrari? Like, it's definitely doesn't have the same appeal, him doing it in a Mercedes, but I'm not sure does that necessarily transfer to the idea that he would have as good a chance in a Ferrari. I think that's not the case whatsoever.
Yeah, it would be great to see him win, but like, he's not going to win. Is that not the problem? They're no good.
That's certainly, again, haven't watched enough of it to actually say for sure, but certainly Mercedes seem to have had the technological advantage over the last few seasons anyway. The Daily Telegraph, second last one for me, risk or restart. Players to be told Premier League to outline new normal at meeting. As mentioned, that meeting's taking place today. And Fowler voices his COVID-19 fears over Townsend. So this is Andros Townsend's dad, who's been out saying that he can't enjoy football restart and that captains to seek promises over BAME players' safety. England bowlers to be first to return to nets on Monday is the latest on the cricket, and roadmap to signal way for competitive sport as well. That's the latest from the UK.
The Irish News is next. I actually can't read that on. Sorry.
The Irish News this morning, Turbot saying missing promotion will only act as a spur for Armagh, and Celtic welcome defeated resolution, but Rangers vow to fight on. That's the latest there from the Irish News. And then the last paper this morning for me is the Herald. No fans for Irish games. Closed doors matches for 2020 dampener for Kenny. Golf getting back to normal. Meanwhile, this is the golf course superintendent of Hoth Golf Club, Ger Morgan, works in the 9th green at Hoth there. You can probably make that out. His golf clubs get ready to reopen. And nostalgia isn't what it used to be for RTE, is the headline in the Herald with regards to the rights of the old games that RTE are looking to broadcast. Right, it is 20 to 9.